Once upon a time, there lived a king, King Adedayo, who was ruler of the Ife kingdom. He was a strong and powerful king. He had many riches which he had acquired by conquering many kingdoms over time. He became afflicted with a strange ailment. A strong and vibrant king became weak and paralyzed. In order not to lose the throne, his son Ikenna ascended the throne. In their tradition, any person who ascended the throne had to take a queen within 90 days of his coronation as king. So, Ikenna had to marry, otherwise the throne would be passed on to another family. The day following his coronation as king, he held a banquet in the palace, and many beautiful maidens came from all parts of the kingdom. Over 100 girls were present that night. It was Oluchi that caught his eye. There and then he chose her as his queen, and she was declared his wife as was tradition. That night, Ikenna took Oluchi to the royal chamber as man and wife. However, before the sun came up the next morning, Oluchi had died. Ikenna was sad. How could this happen? She seemed perfectly fine the day before. She showed no signs of ill health. Ikenna had only a few weeks to mourn Oluchi, as he still had to pick a queen before the 90 days elapsed. So he held another banquet, and again, many beautiful maidens came to the banquet. He chose Tenny. Tenny was a petite girl, but she was very beautiful and had a lovely smile. Ikenna fell in love with her and declared her his wife. As was tradition, he took her to the royal chambers, and again, before the sun rose up, she had died. At this, everyone started looking at the new king suspiciously. Was he eating his brides? They asked. Ikenna was so sad. What was going on? He asked himself. He had never had this type of misfortune all his life. He was always obedient, kind, and considerate. But now things have become difficult. Again, because he had to take a wife before the 90-day mark, he held another banquet. This time, less than a quarter came to the banquet. He had only 10 girls to pick from. He picked Alfreda. She was from a poor background and she was not particularly pretty. But at this point, Ikenna did not care. That night, he asked Alfreda to sleep in her own chambers and not with him in the royal chambers. However, the next morning when he went to check on her, she had died as well. The entire village became afraid. Members of the cabinet had started a petition to get Ikenna off the throne and crown Aguna, the son of the cabinet head, as the new king. This made Ikenna sad. Why was this happening now that he was king? He called the chief priest and asked him to explain what was happening. After a few incantations, the chief priest said that something terrible had happened on the throne. Someone was killed and it was the royal family who murdered that person. This was the highest allegation in the land. To accuse the royal family of murder was punishment by hanging. The cabinet members shouted at the chief priest. What are you saying? They asked. Are you accusing Ikenna of murder? Surely the gods would have said something before he was crowned. Ikenna cried out and said he had never killed in his life. The chief priest said he did not know the murderer as the gods had not yet revealed it to him. All he knew was that the murderer was a member of the royal family. Ikenna had his father, mother, and 3 other brothers, but he could not see any one of them as a murderer. He refused to believe it. There was a mix-up somewhere, but what could it be? His 90 days were almost up, and he had no time. He then asked the chief priest what could be done. The chief priest said the murderer had to be punished and the priest appeased. Otherwise, there would never be a queen. Without a queen, there would be no king. The entire village was ablaze. Who could be the murderer? Every member of the royal family was denying it. One day, a madman demanded to see Ikenna, the king. This was unheard of. As the guards tried to chase him away, Ikenna asked to see him. The man came before Ikenna in the throne room and said he knew who the murderer was. Everyone was surprised. The man claimed that one night, He was on a tree, drinking his palm wine. After a while, he fell asleep. He was on the tree for a few hours when he heard what sounded like a man and a woman arguing. The woman had become pregnant and she wanted the man to marry her immediately. The only problem was that the man was of royal blood. A man from the royal family was not allowed to have mistresses. He could have as many wives as he wanted. As was tradition, he could only take a virgin as a wife. The woman seemed to understand this, but she kept insisting that the man marry her. No one would know that she was with child, only the both of them. The man refused, and then from nowhere he struck her and she fell and died. The man left, and a few minutes later, two other men came and buried the woman under the tree. When the madman came down from the tree, he saw what looked like a gold bracelet next to the shallow grave. He took it and ran. The madman, afraid for his life, did not speak about the incident to anyone. He knew that the man was of the royal household, so he did not speak to anyone about it, because who would believe him? But now, due to the events of the past few weeks, he had to speak up. He showed the bracelet to Ikenna. This was a very serious allegation. What the madman had said was very detailed with time and what couples wore and what they had said. Why would he lie? Ikenna called his brothers before the man. They all spoke, but the man said their voices did not sound like the man he had heard. Then, if that's the case, you're lying, Ikenna said. These are all the men of the royal family, except his father who is now old and sick. Himself and his three brothers were the only men of the royal family. The villagers did not believe him. Seeing that he was gradually losing the trust of his people, Ikenna asked the chief priest what can be done. The chief priest said Ikenna had to go to the land of the dead and speak to this woman. She alone would know the man she slept with. To go to the land of the dead, there had to be a ritual ceremony performed. Ikenna will fall asleep for his spirit to be transported to the land of the dead. The land was very dangerous for the living, and he may not come back alive. Ikenna's mother and brothers did not want him to go, but at the same time they did not want to lose the throne. That night, Ikenna went to see his father in his chambers. He told his father all that had happened and why he was going to the land of the dead. But his father said nothing. Although he was sick, he could still speak. His health was rapidly deteriorating, and Ikenna was afraid that he may not see his father again if he did not make it back alive. The next day, Ikenna went through the ritual ceremony, and to be able to find the woman faster, the ceremony was performed close to her burial place. When he woke up, he looked around. The place seemed devoid of life, but he could hear scary voices. The sky was covered with black clouds. He turned to look for the woman, but he saw what seemed like a small child running past him. It seemed like the child was playing with someone. When he looked up, he saw the child running towards a woman. She was the most beautiful woman Ikenna had ever seen. She had a beautiful smile. Ikenna walked up to her. Upon seeing him, she immediately knew that he was not dead. She asked, "What are you doing here? You're not a dead man." Ikenna responded that he was looking for a woman who had this bracelet. When she saw the bracelet, her smile vanished. In its place was anger. She said in a very evil voice, "Where did you get that from?" Ikenna explained what was happening at the palace and why he was here. The woman laughed. She had an evil laugh. She said, unless he confessed, he would lose everything. Ikenna asked with desperation, "Who is he?" She responded, "The father of my child." That's when it occurred to Ikenna that he had found who he was looking for. He asked, "Is this bracelet yours?" The woman did not respond. She just looked at him. Then he decided to change his line of questioning. He asked, "Did you love him?" She said yes. "Did he promise you marriage?" She said yes. "Then what happened?" Ikenna asked. The woman responded and said, "He changed his mind. He said I was not worthy to be queen." Ikenna asked, "Queen?" But none of his brothers could make her a queen, only himself or his father. It was at this point that everything fell into place for Ikenna. The realization of what he had just found showed on his face. The woman nodded and said, "Unless the king confessed, he would lose everything." Immediately, Ikenna woke up. He looked around and saw that he was back. He ran with all his might to the palace and barged into his father's room. "How could you?" he screamed. "How dare you?" Everyone from the ritual ground to the villagers, to the royal guards, to the royal maids, had followed him. They saw that he was very upset. He was shaking in anger, but his father did not seem to care. It was his mother and the chief priest that asked, "What happened? Tell us what happened." Ikenna told them the whole story. All this time, it was their father who had had the affair and then killed the woman and her child to cover up his tracks. Now everything was falling down on him. The chief priest exclaimed and said, "Now it makes sense why such a strong man became weak overnight. It was one thing to kill that woman, but to kill her unborn innocent child is something even the gods cannot forgive." The king, because of his pride, refused to go to the woman's grave to beg for forgiveness. Because of this, Ikenna's family was thrown out of the palace, and King Adedayo was left to die on the streets. Because he was not given a proper burial as a king, his spirit could not ascend to his ancestors. The villagers went to the woman's grave and performed the reconciliation ceremony, appeasing her spirit. Thank you so much for listening to another episode. If you liked it, please subscribe, like, comment, share. Thank you to those who have subscribed. Thank you to those who have supported. Until next time, goodbye.
I'm